Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. As someone who has always enjoyed writing, when I started homeschooling and realized that not all of my kids enjoyed writing as much as I did, I wasn't really sure what to do. I, as a child, never needed prodding when it came to writing. And teachers in schools don't really have too much flexibility. They have a set curriculum and they have a way that they need to approach things. But I soon realized that I wasn't the only parent who had this problem. Reluctant writers are actually really common, not just in the homeschooling community, but in the community at large. So today I'm hoping to share some tips with you that I've picked up on helping your reluctant writer. So I've been homeschooling now for 11 years, and I do have some kids who are like me and who do enjoy writing, and they don't need any sort of prompting in order to do it. I, on the other hand, do have kids who don't really like to do it so much. And so it was for those kids that I really need to find some hacks that were going to help us that weren't necessarily a magic pill. There's no magic writing pill that will automatically make 100% of the kids who use it love to write. What I was hoping, though, was to just make writing more palatable, something that my kids didn't mind doing as much as they used to do. So I'm hoping some of these tips will help you today. And, better yet, maybe some of these tips will help one of your kids to learn to love to write. So, that's always something to look up to, right? So anyway, the very first method that I have to help your child who doesn't particularly like to write might surprise you a little bit, but it's copy work. Now, some of you might be wondering what copy work is. Copy work is simply copying the works of another author. It could be poems, like these are Shel Silverstein poems that my son copied in here. It could be Shakespeare. It could be Bible verses. I know a lot of people use Proverbs to do copy work. Some people will have their children copy paragraphs out of books that they're reading, or they might have them research different things that they're interested in and have them copy facts about them. And so I know a lot of you are probably thinking, well, how does copy work help a child who doesn't like to write? Because, the really big skill for kids to learn when it comes to writing is how to express themselves clearly so that other people understand. And I get it. Copy work is not a child expressing themselves. They are writing down what someone else has to say. But, there are a lot of benefits in copy work that might not include having your child express themselves, but it will gear them up for learning to do that in the future. So one way for that is if your child is copying the works of another successful author, they are copying a time-honored way of writing, a time-honored writing style. And, Benjamin Franklin is famous for saying that he used to copy the works of other authors, not as plagiarism, but he would have a copybook and he would copy down what the other authors had to say and how they wrote. That was how he learned how to write in different styles and not just in one particular style. And I think that we realize that Benjamin Franklin, he was pretty smart. So if he found value in that, I find value in that too. Another way that copy work can help kids who are reluctant writers is a lot of times kids who don't like to write, it's not just because they don't know exactly what it is that they want to say. A lot of times it has to do with fine motor skills, and they are actually having problems with their hand cramping. So if you give a child something to write, and so their hand is hurting, and then on top of that, they're not sure what they want to write, and they're trying to think of that, it is going to make for a miserable experience. So copy work will at least take one of those things away. It will help a child learn to write more often, and in the hopes of their hand not hurting as much over time, but they don't need to worry so much about the mental aspect of it. They're just copying someone else's work. And the copy work also really does help kids, I have to say this, with spelling and punctuation and grammar. So there are a lot of really good values to find in copy work, and it's a great starting point. Now, certainly I wouldn't say that this is the only way that you should teach writing to your kids, because as I mentioned before, you do want your kids to have the ability to express themselves on paper in a way that other people understand. But copy work is certainly a great way to get them ready for that. So another idea for helping your kids who don't particularly like to write is a free writing journal. And my kids keep free writing journals. We just use, little composition books that I pick up at the dollar store. And most of my kids actually use their free writing journals for stories. They like to write stories, and you can probably see that as I'm paging through this. This is my daughter's. Free writing journals, though, are not simply for writing stories. What a free writing journal is it's something that you can have your child write in as often as you want. You could have them do it daily. You could have them do it maybe 2 or 3 days a week. You could have them do it weekly. That is really up to you. But the idea of a free writing journal is that they can write anything that they want to. They can do copy work in it if they want to. They could write a grocery list if they want to. They could write a recipe that they want to try if they want to. They could write stories like my kids like to. They could write facts about their favorite animals. They could make comic strips about something that they were reading about. They could write a narration of a book that they're reading. It's literally carte blanche when it comes to free writing journals. So, it's not like you're assigning something to your kids. A lot of kids have an aversion to that. They kind of get overwhelmed when they have an actual writing assignment. So if you give them a journal and tell them, hey, you know what? I'm going to give this to you just because I want you to get used to writing every day, but you can write in it absolutely whatever you want in any way that you want to. And that is another way to get your kids used to writing. So besides free writing journals, some kids really enjoy writing prompts. This is one that I picked up at Five Below. This is for my older daughter, but you can pick up writing prompts for younger kids as well. And you can also find a lot of them for free online. So if you don't know what a writing prompt is, it will tell you something to write about. So for example, in this one here, it says, describe what the term gentleman means to you. And so then she would write on that what that means to her. Or what are your thoughts about reality TV? Is there any benefit to watching it? So sometimes writing prompts are simply questions that are supposed to be thought-provoking and will help your child to express themselves or to think about what they think of things. Other writing prompts, though, can actually be the beginning of stories. You could tell them to, you walk outside and it is raining cats and dogs. What do you do next? And you could have them write something like that. Or you could actually give them a partial beginning sentence to start with, have them finish that sentence, and then they can continue on from there with that story. And a lot of kids really do like that. There were some Christmas writing prompts that I used with my kids a few years ago, and they really enjoyed the Christmas writing prompts. So if you find something that your kids are going to like, something that is right up their alley, chances are you're not going to have to push too much to get them to write for them. So another way that you can get your kids to write is, I told you how my kids like to write stories in their free writing journals. You could also simply have your kids do creative writing. Some kids are very imaginative and like to write stories. And I know that there comes a point in time in your homeschool when your kids are going to have to learn how to write reports, and they're going to have to learn how to, take down notes and write down facts. But for a child who doesn't particularly like writing, if they do enjoy using their imagination, let them write fiction. Let them write their own creative writing story. Let them be about whatever it is that they want. And again, just let them get used to writing so that they don't have this deep aversion to it that so many kids do. Now, another neat thing that you could do if you have your kids doing creative writing is you could have them make their own Mad Libs. So if they would write their own short story, and then you would have them erase, a few of the nouns or a few of the verbs or a few of the adverbs, and then they could do Mad Libs with their own writings with their siblings. That might also be a great way for your kids to like writing just a little bit more, especially if your kids are already familiar with Mad Libs. My kids absolutely love Mad Libs. So if your kids know what they are, if they enjoy doing them, that might be another idea for something that might help them. So along the lines of the creative writing, again, is what I call a group story. When I was a kid, mainly in middle school, my best friend, she lived about 6 doors up from me, and we had a spiral notebook. It was a 5-subject spiral notebook. And every day I would write part of a story in it, and then I would pass it on to her, and she would add to the story, and then she would hand it back to me, and I would add more, and we would just keep going back and forth like that until the story was done. And I remember the one time when I think I was 12, she was 13, she was in a grade higher than I was, we had like a 40-something page story that we had written together, and we thought it was a lot of fun. And that's another idea that your kids could do if they have friends that they could do it with, or it could be something that they do with other family members. But it's funny to see how your family member might have a completely different take on something. You might be writing something with a certain idea, a certain culmination in mind, and then if you pass it on just at the right point and someone comes up with something completely different, that can really be a lot of fun too, and it might be something that your kids would enjoy. Now, I'm going to talk to you just a little bit about reports, because writing reports can really be overwhelming for kids, especially if they don't like to write. And I'm hoping in the future to do a more detailed video on how to help your kids to write reports. But I'm going to just share with you a couple tips about report writing today, something that I think is actually really, really crucial. A lot of times when we tell our kids that they need to write a report, we might give them the date that we expect it to be due. We might tell them the things that we want included in that story or in the report. We might tell them how it is that they want it, how we want it presented to us. And so a lot of times for some kids who don't mind doing it, that's fine. They have the information that they need and they can write that. Other kids, when they look at all of that, they get overwhelmed at knowing that they have all of this stuff that they have to do by a certain amount of time. And so for some kids, it really does help to just break things up into bite-sized pieces for your kids, especially if they are new to report writing. And you could just tell them specifically what it is that they should work on in their report for that day, and just keep doing that every day until the day that it's due. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you now a little bit about written narration, because I know that there are a lot of kids who don't mind doing oral narrations and who are really good at oral narration, but if you ask them to actually write it down, they will fight you tooth and nail and will refuse to write it down. So one thing that I actually started doing with my kids when they would just kind of get nervous about writing down their oral narration, I would just tell them, you know what, guys? First of all, I don't want you to write this for me. I want you to write this for you. I want you to write this so that in the future you can look at this and you can remember what it was that you were reading about. And then another thing that I will tell them when it comes to oral narration is I will tell them, I want you to think about when you are telling me something about the story, when you are orally narrating something to me, I want you to write it exactly as you would speak it. And so one thing that might help with that is maybe if you would record them giving an oral narration, or even if you would do a video of them giving an oral narration, and then afterwards they could write it down, simply to get used to writing a written narration of what they were speaking. And so related to that is if you have a child who is younger, or if you have a child who, really, really detests writing, you could ask them specifically what it is that they want to say. And you could either record them saying what it is that they want to write about, or you could take a dictation. You could write down what it is that they're telling you that they want to say, and then they could write it afterwards, either by copying what you wrote or by listening to the recording, or maybe the video if you did it that way, of what they were saying and exactly what it is that they wanted to write. So, they don't have to do it that way just for narration. They could do that pretty much about anything. One of my sons he was one of my reluctant writers. One of the ways that I got him to enjoy writing was he would always want to write in his free writing journal about animals. And so I would say to him, well, what animal do you want to write about today? Well, I want to write about snakes. Well, what is it that you want to write about snakes? And then he would specifically tell me what he wanted to write about snakes. And I would write it down for him in his journal. And then afterwards, he would copy it down. But I would write it exactly as he said it to me. So that is another way to get kids more used to writing who might not, have a preference for doing it on their own. Anyway, I hope that these tips have been helpful for you. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one over on Instagram because YouTube disabled my comments. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.